Hello and welcome back to this Emperor's Path vlog. Today we're going to be talking about my new exhibition layout. Now, this project is something that I started a few months ago and I've just sort of gotten around to starting the editing process and trying to sort of piece everything together. And basically what I'm doing is I'm building a 4-foot by 8-foot layout built on 4 2x4 boards. Now, the way I've laid the boards out is to make it easy in terms of the particular sidings that I'm going to have. So that's going to play a big part further down the line. The one thing that I wanted to do with this layout is I wanted to be able to have something that didn't require points, using a turntable, but also keeping it something that I could have in the diesel era. Obviously that's what I have a lot of stock of on my railway, and it meant that I didn't have to go out and buy loads of new stuff to be able to run this. Which led me to looking at a lot of the old oak common turntable and shed areas from the 1980s, 1990s, and I basically found the perfect layout for what I wanted. It was compact enough that I could have made it smaller if I wanted to, or bigger depending, and basically arrived at the size that I did. And it has a 3-lane shed attached to it, which is sort of like a maintenance shed. Has the turntable, lots of sidings that come off it for the locos to sit and wait at, and then a few lanes that come off the turntable and go off into various aspects of the layout. I wanted it to be something that I could operate on DCC, and when I get the chance to finally motorise the turntable, I'll be able to hopefully make that DCC as well. The reason I didn't want points on there was because usually when I see a lot of the layouts that are being operated at shows, sometimes points seem to be one of the biggest problems for those who are running, and it just makes it a lot more convoluted trying to run things, and you get things stalling on points. So I went for a turntable, which I'm not sure will necessarily be the best thing in the end, but I've got my plan. So we're going to talk through where the baseboard currently sits at the moment. We're going to talk about how I built the boards. We're going to go back in time and I'm going to show you the boards as they currently are at the time of filming, and then we're going to talk about what's coming up next. So let's first move on to baseboard construction. So the baseboards were constructed using 12mm ply on the top and using bits of timber from B&Q to construct the baseboards. I basically had the 4 sections cut up at B&Q because they do it for free for you, and this basically allowed me to have the 4 2x4 sections. I then built the frames for it using the long pieces to be the 4-foot section, and then cutting the side bits to just below 2 foot, measuring them all up and attaching them together. And then I put brackets down the middle, which is something that I didn't do on my loft layout when I first initially built it, and that's something I have to go back and do later down the line, which I'm not looking forward to. I then was able to cut a hole for the turntable. That was the most important part, and I had to figure out where that was all going to sit. So I've done that now, and that's all done. In terms of constructing baseboards, I did try filming some bits, but there are much better videos out there on how to construct a baseboard than something that I could put together. So what I actually wanted to do was start talking about my layout and what's different from anyone else's. So let's go and have a look at the layout as it currently sits. We're going to pop down to my dining room and you're going to see where it currently sits at the moment, and then I'll be back with you in a sec. So first thing you may realise is we are not in any of my usual filming areas. That is because I do not have the space for this particular layout when it is fully set up in any room bar my dining room. So it is currently balancing on my dining room table. So just talking through what state the layout is currently in. So we have the turntable piece already put in. I drilled the hole for that using a jigsaw. And what I've done is I have put pieces of cork bed underneath where all of the sidings for all of the individual trains are going to be. There will be people who will be asking why the 2 boards on the far right are in the particular way that they are, and I know that I possibly could have saved having to have as many joins as I do, but because of the location of the 3 centre lines, I needed to make sure that they weren't going to be disturbed. And the way I tried to measure it all out meant that if I turned the two right-hand boards 90 degrees and had them sort of going lengthways along here and here, it would mean that the track would probably actually be not in the place that I wanted it to be. The main reason I wanted to do this was because I really struggle to get in the loft when it gets to the summertime, and we are entering British summertime now, loose terms because it's raining today, and it gets quite difficult to get into the loft. And secondly, when I went to the Portsmouth Rail-X, I just had such an amazing time looking at all the different layouts. Now, admittedly, this has sort of been a little bit bigger than I anticipated because I was going to be doing it on 2x3 footboards. But once I actually started laying down track and working out how much I needed for my biggest locos, such as a Class 50, I actually needed more space for the track than I anticipated. So I decided to go with 4 footboards rather than 3 foot. So now all of them are 2x4. So in total, this layout is 8 foot by 4 foot. We'll start on the left-hand side down at this board. So this board is probably the one that's going to give me the most amount of pain when it comes to lining up the track. And for that reason, I've tried to make it so that the turntable is as close to there as possible. People may agree or disagree with why I've done this, but hopefully when we start laying track and getting everything sorted, I'll be able to win my fight for why we've done this. I'm not so fussed about these being completely wired up correctly because the way I've done it meant that I would have at least 8 single sidings already that I can put locos on. And if it turns out that the ones on this left-hand board are just for display and don't necessarily work so well, I can still put locos on there and address that as I need to, as and when. So there's an inspection pit hole on this left-hand board using the Pico inspection pit with the Code 75 rail. My aim is to be able to install that and make it so that I can have the inspection pit there. Then I've got plenty of space on this left-hand board to start doing a lot more scenics than I would have on any of my other boards that I've done up in the loft. And that's one of the reasons it's probably as big as it actually is. And it means that using different scenic kits, I can put buildings in and I can put roads and I can put lighting and stuff like that, and maybe some hills or something like that to sort of add a little bit more depth to the layout. So second board in, this board here, is obviously the main board. This is everything has to work on here, which is why I've laid it out as best as I have in this particular way. As I've already said, those 4 sidings that are off on this board, don't include this one because that's barely anything on the end of there, but these 4, if they don't work, they don't work. However, I wanted the sidings or the lanes that are on this side, I needed them to be perfect and I needed them to work as best as I could. So the more length that I was able to give them on this particular board meant that I had a better chance of making sure that they worked further down the line. Because of the way I've got the 8 sidings that are surrounding the turntable on this particular board, that works perfectly. I've got this siding that goes off on towards the main line, and I've got these 2, one here which is a very long siding, and then I've got the one at the back that also goes off, and that goes off towards other sheds and other things in reality, but actually what that basically goes off to is the fiddle yard. The 3 pieces of track in the centre just here are going to be the 3 pieces of track that go into the diesel shed. Now obviously Bachmann make that beautiful Scenecraft shed, but it is a 2-lane shed, and as I'm basing mine on the Old Oak Common depot, I wanted to have that 3-lane shed, so I'm going to have to really work out what I want to do in terms of making this particular shed. But I like the 3-lane option that I've got there. I've got that nice big siding that if I really wanted to, I could add something onto there like a refueling station or something like that. So moving on to the third board in, which is this board here. So this will be in the centre up here. This will be all shed. So hopefully this will be a shed that I'll be able to remove, and that shed is going to go from the very join there to the very end there. And the reason for that is because at the end of this board is where the
scenic break and the fiddle yard begins. So it means that I can have a whole shed on there and I can have stuff under there, and when it comes out the other end, the opposite end of the turntable, you don't necessarily have to see it. I've obviously got those bits up there as well where that goes off on towards the fiddle yard, and then I've got this section here that goes off towards the fiddle yard as well. Now the joy of doing it the way I've done it, where I tried to squeeze or tried to put as much of those legs of track on the main board first, means that by the time I got to the joins in this board, that they were sort of as close to being straight as I could make them without doing too many aggressive turns. So finally, we're going to go over to the far right board, which is going to be the fiddle yard, the scenic break. So in between the boards over here, there's going to be a back scene, which is going to be able to disguise the fiddle yard. There's also going to be a back scene at the back over here. And that enables me to have a fiddle yard basically where I can put locos coming in, coming out. They can go out of the shed, take them off, put a new one on, and then so forth, just go up and down and up and down. Also allows me to bring locos in on here and locos in down here. Now there was talk when I was building this that I was going to basically run a line of track from the very edge of the fiddle yard going all the way down the front here to signify a running line, a main line, so that if I really wanted to incorporate a loop at a later date, I could and have some trains running. But that's not necessarily something I need to do right now. So as this is I guess the main join between the two centre boards, which are the most important boards in my eyes, I thought I'd talk about what we've done with the track and how we've aligned it. Now, I know that you can do copper clad sleepers and things like that. However, as this is my first exhibition layout and it's also something that I'm extremely scared about, and the reason I haven't done it in the past is I've actually used these. And these are the Model Tech board joiners. And for someone like me who is new to this, these are fantastic. I love them. And the beauty of these is that these are two pieces that join together via a little wavy piece, as you can see here. That enables them to line up. So you put these on your baseboard joint and it enables you to lock the location of the sleepers that you need it to be. And because they are copper or brass clad, it enables you to solder the ends of the track on there. And what I did was I ran an entire piece of track all along here, cut out where the sleepers needed to go, put them underneath the rails, soldered them on, and then that enabled me to cut the rails where I needed to. And so far I've put these two boards in particular together over and over again to check that they work, and so far I'm happy. I haven't had any problems. Because of this, I've also been able to put the dropper wires on here because I don't have to worry about accidentally melting the sleepers, because these are metal. I can just put them straight on. I don't think they're metal, they're basically circuitry pieces, I think. I'm very pleased with them anyway. I have had to get quite a few of them, but they have proven perfect for someone like me who is doing this for the first time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little video up here which demonstrates me using a Hornby Percy from the Thomas & Friends range and a simple DC controller. And what I did is, because the motor that's in this is one that requires a lot of voltage to physically move, but creates a small buzz when it's has voltage going through it, it allowed me to hear where the dead spots were on the turntable. Because if you don't know, the Pico turntable comes with two half pieces, which means that once it gets to a certain point, it loses power. And that's so that you don't have a problem with conflicting negative and positive lines. So let's have a quick look at that in a close version. So to explain this, when the turntable is going around, it has two pins underneath it, and as it goes around, what happens is at a certain point the pins go round and then they hit these little blank spots. Now this means that you lose power momentarily, which is fine, because what that does is it means that when it comes back around to here, the polarity of the turntable changes. fine for me. I'm using DCC. By checking headlights and stuff like that, I'm able to see what direction my engines are going in, hopefully. It will mean that any sound locomotives do need to have sterilize built into them, or don't use DCC sound. So that's something that I need to think about. So one of the things I had to do was try and find where the dead spots were on the turntable. And as you can see on the board, I've marked up dead for where the dead spots were. And what I did was I worked out, first of all, in my head where they should be. So I had a rough idea. Then I put the turntable, the actual centre bit on, and I put the Percy in the middle of it, and I put a little bit of voltage on the DC controller. And what this did was it meant that Percy was creating a small buzz as he was going round. So I moved the turntable round, and the buzz stopped when I hit the dead points. What I did was, as soon as I reached a dead point, I marked it on the table or on the layout, and then kept moving it, and then the buzz would come back, signifying that I had power again. Perfect. So I've marked it up on here. So I'm just going to put a little video in here so you can see what I'm talking about, and hopefully it makes more sense. So now that you've seen the top of the layout, let's have a look underneath. You can have a look at how I've wired things, and then we can bring it back down and we'll talk about how I've joined the baseboards together, what I've used, and what the next step is on this particular layout project. Okay, so this is what the underside of the layout currently looks like. I'm going to admit, my wiring is not the best wiring in terms of tidiness. However, that's something that I'm looking to fix whilst building this layout. What I have tried to do at the moment is all of the wires that I've put through, because I've put the feeder wires down for the pieces of track. Hopefully, I'll be able to tidy those up at a later date. But for now, I just wanted them to not be hanging under the board, which is hopefully what I've done. So on the far left, you can see on the screen at the moment, that is the left-hand side of the scenic piece. The idea is that I'll have a lot of extra space to do some of the scenics on there that I haven't had to do on my layout in the loft. So the idea is that the inspection pit's going there, which is why that's that random hole just cut in the board. And then you've got the turntable section, the bit that goes just into the shed, and then the one on the far right at the moment, as you can see, I haven't got any wiring done in that one either. That will be the off-scene piece. So having a look at all of this, you can see that some of the board liners don't line up, and that's absolutely fine with me. I didn't need them to line up the sort of supports in the middle. They just needed to be there to support the board. So hopefully this makes sense after you've seen the top part, and I'll be able to explain a few bits. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move in closer, and we're going to talk about some of the things that I've done underneath. So let's have a closer look at all of the bits that I've used underneath here. So what I've used to secure the boards all together are alignment dowels. I've used 2 sets of alignment dowels per board connection. So there's one roughly around here, and there's one roughly around here somewhere. And that's roughly the same in each piece. And that's just to make sure that all of the boards line up, no problem. Then used M8 bolts to secure all of the boards together. Now I went for what I thought when I purchased them would be quite long bolts, and as it turns out, I'm glad I bought the bigger ones because they're still short in the grand scheme of things. I also, on the recommendation of somebody on the Railway Modelers app, recommended that I went for the butterfly nuts or bolts on them for ease of putting this all together. One thing that I want to sort of cover whilst I'm going over this is going to be DCC wired. So all of the bus wires are basically going to be all connected together so that I can run all of the locos as and how I please without having to worry about sort of isolating sections of track. So this is the section of board that I've done the most amount of wiring on. The board to the right of this one has basically just straight bits of track that go off between the turntable section and the fiddle yard section. So that one just has dropper wires coming off those particular rails, and I still need to do some more of those down the line. But on this one, I've had to put dropper wires on every single piece of track that comes off the turntable, which is why there's a lot that comes down, and it's still not finished because I still have to put more pieces of track down. However, I've tried to connect it all up as best as I can. I bought some of these bus wires on the recommendation of Charlie from Chadwick Model Railway. I used his affiliate link, and so far I'm not angry or mad about any of these bits. The one thing I would possibly say for my own personal benefit, because I'm splitting up all of these sections, I may have purchased smaller ones, but that is a me problem, not an anyone else problem, because I don't necessarily need all of the terminals that I have on there. Now, if anybody knows if I'm using these wrong, looking at the diagrams of them, it looked like to me you couldn't have red and black on the same one. You had to have one red, one black. If that's incorrect, let me know. But yeah, that gives you a rough idea of how this has been wired up. And as I say, I'd love to be able to tidy all of this up. So if anybody has any recommendations of how I can tidy this all up, brilliant. Now, because I'm able to separate all of the boards and do this all individually, it does mean that I can work on one of these in my office without having to do the whole section. And once I've done one, I'll learn, and then I'll be able to work on the other pieces. So it's quite simple under here. I have the joy of knowing that I don't have to have any points on this layout. So it does certainly help me in terms of the wiring. I only need to sort out the motor for the turntable and making sure that all of the dropper wires are sorted and connected together for DCC. Let's have a look at the layout back on the floor now that we've seen the wiring, and hopefully parts will make sense. So now that you've seen the board, I guess the next thing to talk about is where we're going next. The main thing that I want to get sorted is I want to make sure that the 8 main sidings, loco sidings on here are put down next. So I'll be getting some more of the bullhead track to put on here, and I'll be adding all of those on. Once they are done, I will be then working on getting the fiddle yard section done. So I have another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces. It looks like one of them should have a piece, but it doesn't need to. That's a siding. So I need another 5 sections of track to cover that area so that I have a nice fiddle yard to work with. Once I've done that, the next stage will be laying the track and getting all of the connections sorted for the far left piece. As I said, this is the last piece I want to do. It's the last piece I'm going to worry about in the sense of making sure that all of the connections are sorted. Now, that far one on the actual main board where it has just the tiniest bit at the end, I'm not worried about the connection on there because that is basically just enough space for the buffers to go, and the loco that goes into that siding won't have to worry about the connection because it will have the entirety of that track. So that's not a problem to me. I just need to make sure that when I'm doing the ones on the far left board that I try and get the connections as best I can. I won't be using the Model Tech normal pieces for this. They do also make a set that is just like the copper clad pieces but allows you to solder on to the bits, and they are not connected across the board. So the other thing that I need to do, and it is the main thing that I'm going to be worrying about once all this track is sorted, is getting legs sorted. Now I have various ideas for this, so what I'm going to do is we're going to go back to the desk and we're going to talk about what we're doing with legs.
So where do we go from here? So I guess the big thing is I need to find a way of having the layout stand up. Now I've already gone out and purchased lots of IKEA desk legs. Now this was an option that I picked simply because of cost. So far with the layout, I haven't had to purchase anything for it. It has been a case of I have gifted or used. I haven't spent my physical money. It's all been Christmas presents, or it's been gift vouchers and stuff that I've had for it. So me being a cheapskate, I didn't necessarily want to have to build really high table legs for it. So what I did was I looked at IKEA. I've used it before in the past. They have these great table leg sections that use this plate. And this plate screws into the underside of the desk, and then the actual leg screws into this section. Now the reason this is good is for storage. It means that these plates can stay on the bottom of the baseboard and the legs can unscrew and store away as needed without having to have the foldable legs. Also means that I've got nice durable metal legs on there, and because they've got adjustable feet, you can adjust the height to make it so that everything sits nice and level. So I've currently got, I think I've got 8 of these, and I probably will have to buy more. What I then need to do moving forward is I'm going to be getting some bits of timber that are going to be this width, and they are going to go underneath the baseboard for these to screw into. Now I've done this simply with the idea of to make it as strong as possible to sit on. There's not going to be loads and loads of electronics going on underneath, and I'm going to make sure that none of it is in the way of the butterfly clips or anything like that. So I've got all of that. That's my next big step moving forward. Following on after this, I have actually done a little bit of track work since the initial video that I shot, and have basically made it so that the initial 8 sidings that are on the main board have all been done. So they might just need wiring up or anything, but they are done. So that means that effectively, if I really wanted to, I could start testing the trains on there. Moving forward, I need to make sure that I start saving up for the turntable motor, because that's going to be the most expensive part, and I want to make sure that I get a good turntable motor on there that will actually be quite finite and work how I want it to. So that's next, and I've got some ideas on the line for that. Following on from that, it will be a simple case of just finishing up the track work across all of the boards. Once all of the track work is done, I'll start then testing everything. As I say, by that point hopefully I'll have the point motor, I'll have the turntable motor, and I need to get my NCE power cab, another front fascia, to go onto the actual layout so that I can just plug my NCE power cab in and just run it from that. Once that's all in place, I'll be able to start having a play around. The beauty of this is that effectively I can, in a certain amount, I don't need to set up every single piece all at once for testing. What I can do is I can get the main turntable, and then I can have the far left piece, I can have the far right piece, I can have the other middle piece in there, and I don't need to take up the entire room whilst I'm doing testing with it. So that's something that I'm really happy about, although setting it up in one giant piece will also be quite fun. So that's where this exhibition layout is going to be going. These videos aren't going to be anywhere near as frequent as other videos, simply because I'll be doing this in between all my other bits. I've got bits upstairs in the loft that I'm going to be working on as well as doing some airbrushing and my commissioned work in the background as well. But hopefully you've enjoyed watching this and you're going to see it grow. If you have any ideas on things that you'd like to see on this particular layout, or things that you think maybe I could do in the future of it, that'd be great. But otherwise, I look forward to hearing your comments down below. If you've liked this video, please make sure that you click the like button, leave a comment down below of any questions that you have, and if you haven't already, please make sure that you subscribe to this channel. And thanks very much. I've been Sam. See you later.